Welcome to the Counselling Tutor Podcast, the must-listen-to podcast for students of counselling and psychotherapy. Here are your hosts, Rory Lees-Oakes and Ken Kelly.
Hello, I'm Rory, and with me, as always, is Ken. How are you, Ken?
Exceptionally well, and a very warm welcome to a brand new series of the Counselling Tutor Podcast. This is episode 159, and we've got an exciting, packed episode today. We're going to be starting off speaking about, a subject that is of this moment, and that is the challenges that students face, not just students, also qualified practitioners, in accessing training at the moment. Face-to-face training has kind of gone down slightly. So specifically for students on courses, that brings up some challenges where e-learning is being put in place and a little bit of distant learning. So we're going to be speaking about some tips for that. We then dip into a brand new section that we have on the Counselling Tutor Podcast, which is Digital Counselling Revolution. And in this section, we're going to be looking at where counselling is going in this modern age and how digital technology can aid the counselling training, the counselling relationship. And then we're going to be ending episode 159 by dipping into practice matters. This is where we look at, presentations that may be of interest to our qualified practitioner friends. And we have Professor Mick Cooper, who is going to be speaking about existentialism. A packed episode indeed, Rory.
Indeed, and I think existentialism is a good place to start. We are in a bit of an existential crisis with the COVID and with how that has impacted on every aspect of our life, and education and practice is absolutely no exception to that. And we know from our Facebook group how the ongoing difficulties with COVID have impacted on students' experience of being educated. And we know this because we've had lots of Facebook posts, certainly at the back end of this year, as people came to the end of their studies, talk about the difficulties they've had with remote learning, with classes being disrupted. And if you want to join our Facebook group and join and get support from thousands of people who are like-minded, who are interested in the world of counselling and psychotherapy, we've got students, we've got some qualified colleagues, we've got some trainers, supervisors, then just go into Facebook, type in Counselling Tutor, and you'll find us. We're a closed group. Knock on the door. We're a friendly bunch. We're going to let you in and join the conversation and get that support you need. But absolutely, it's been very, very difficult and in terms of education. And also I think that the world of education, and in particular counselling, I think sometimes this is forgotten. The remote learning can be very, very useful, but counselling is a specialist way of learning. It's a completely different program to, say, someone who was doing a management course or, say, a hairdressing course. Both of those courses are really important, but counselling is delivered in a very, very different way. And I think tutors are working really hard to try and adapt counselling values and the way counselling is trained into an online environment. But there are challenges, Ken.
There are indeed, and we're seeing this if we look to the awarding bodies. They are facing challenges of how to kind of set the courses out and how they should be delivered. There is word from the professional bodies like the BACP on what is required for the new training environment, and that seems to be changing as we go as well, as is the government's kind of information that is filtering through organizations such as Ofqual. There's a lot of uncertainty out there, but I guess one thing we can be certain of is as we go into the new academic year, there is going to be an element of e-learning on counselling courses in the United Kingdom. And I guess it makes sense with social distancing, with them trying to cut down numbers of people being together in a room. But as you quite rightly said, Rory, the way that counselling is traditionally taught, this brings up some challenges. And one of the challenges with e-learning is that what is teaching that is done in a face-to-face environment does not necessarily transfer well into e-learning. And you can have a really competent tutor, a fantastic, passionate tutor who delivers brilliantly face-to-face. But when that is maybe recorded and then put up as a video, it kind of loses its sparkle and it loses its luster. It's more difficult to pay attention. And I can relate to Rory and myself have just done 2 days of training, getting ourselves ready for what we can deliver in terms of value in Counselling Tutor. And it really was 2 days, 2 full days of training that was done via online. And I have to say, the content of the training was absolutely superb. But I found it difficult to be 100% engaged in that, Rory, because there is a filter. There's a filter sitting in front of me. I'm not in the room feeling the energy of the person and the speaker and the dynamics of that. I'm sat in a room on my own, looking at my computer. I'm getting screen fatigue from that. And it was hard going. And I recognize that the same kind of challenges may face our students.
Yeah, absolutely, Ken. And I think one of the difficulties is that traditional teacher training. I mean, I qualified in 2008 as a qualified teacher. And I know you qualified, I think, the year after, Ken, I think, if my memory serves me correctly, is that in all of the training I had, we never, ever touched online teaching, online classrooms. And I was actually taught by a teacher who was a real techie. She really was. She loved technology in the classroom, but it just didn't exist. Teaching remotely didn't exist when I did my teacher training. And speaking to colleagues who've done teacher training recently, still not something that has been really addressed. And the research, and we've done a lot of research on this, because we are developing our expertise in the world of online training and online counselling. And I think there's an interesting piece of research from Professor Susanna Loeb of Brown University in America. And she was saying that some students do well in online courses as in person to person. So there's strong evidence to say that some people will do really well. And some actually might do better, which is an interesting idea in itself. But on average, and this is the key thing, students do worse on an online setting. And this is particularly true for students with weaker academic backgrounds. So it speaks really to what extra support you can put in place to kind of fill that gap, really. And there's lots of research out there that says that for people with a very strong academic background, they may be okay in an academic situation, but for those people who are not as academic, and that's fine, may struggle transferring a vocational learning into an online environment. So that is why it's really important to have really good resources to hand to support you.
100%, Rory. And just listening to you kind of outline that, and we're talking now about the challenges of e-learning, but this is also about what are the solutions? What can you put in place for yourself? So I'm going to give a challenge of e-learning, and then I'm going to give you kind of a counterbalance of something that you can put in place as a student. And I think what's important to say here is to premise this is not just students on counselling courses. This is our qualified practitioner colleagues as well. With continuing professional development or trainings in specialist areas, a lot of this is going to be e-learning based. So one of the things I remember from my course is we would cover a lecture in the class environment. We would cover the lecture. That lecture, there was opportunity to ask questions and answers, and the same can be mirrored in e-learning as well. The technology is there that you can kind of type in your questions if you don't fully understand, and you can get some answers back. However, I also recognize there were certain times that I didn't ask the question that I maybe had. And the reason I didn't do that is because I knew that right after that lecture, we would have a little bit of a break. We would go into the college canteen, and I would be surrounded by my peers who were on the same course, and I could discuss the course content with them. And I could say, that point that was made in that lecture, how did you understand that? And we would discuss that, and that reinforced my learning, and it reinforced their learning, just talking about the subject matter that we just covered. And within an online environment, that is not there. You don't have the peers around you that you can bounce the ideas off and that you can have those conversations with. So there's the challenge. What is the counterbalance? Well, the counterbalance Rory already mentioned right at the top of this podcast is the Counselling Tutor Facebook group. That is really, really valuable. In the group, there are tens of thousands of students in that group, all that are experiencing the same challenges, mostly from the United Kingdom, although we do have an international reach as well. And within that international reach, those students are facing the same challenges. This is a universal, this is a worldwide issue that students are facing. Inside the group, there are so many conversations, and it's an opportunity for you, if you maybe attend an e-lecture from your learning institution, you get some information, you've got some questions, you don't feel that they were answered in the session, get into the Facebook group and start asking your questions there. You've got fellow students who can share that information with you, and we've got some students and our team that are there as well. So there's a top tip.
Yes, there's something about safety in numbers, and I'd echo Ken's thoughts. Sometimes you're sitting in a group, even I attending this recent training, would have thought, yes, I might ask a question, and then the training moved on. And usually you just pick it up with someone, wouldn't you? You go for a coffee, or in my case, a tea, and you'd say, when when the tutor was talking about this, these were my ideas. You can get this rich theme of learning. That disappears when you're working on your own. So it's really, really important that you get a good support system in place. The Facebook page is a great place to go. And you may even consider starting your own little peer support group up,
yep,
where you can meet up. I mean, you can use a range of software. We use Zoom to record this, partly to record this, or you could use Skype, and you could have a little peer meet up and talk about it. You could do your own virtual coffee break. There we go.
I like that. Virtual coffee breaks, yes. Or in your case, a virtual tea break. I don't know that you drink much coffee.
Yes, there would be some people who would kindly say that my entire day is a virtual tea break, but we'll move on. But yes, start thinking about that now. Start, really, really speaking with your peers, and start thinking about that now, because it's going to be really important. And, sometimes if you're working online on your own, it can be a pretty lonely place. So find like-minded people, come to the Facebook page, ask those questions, get involved, because we're here, and the Facebook group, people in the Facebook group are going to welcome you in and really want to support you, because we're all in this together, really.
We are indeed. So there is one challenge, one suggestion. I'd like to cover another one. So if your learning institution is offering e-learning and they have replays of the learning, try as best you can to be there live when it is being presented live. Now, if you think about this, it doesn't make sense on face value, because the information remains the same whether you're watching it live or you're watching it on a replay. But there is a difference, and here's what the difference is. If you're attending live, you get the opportunity to ask questions. Hopefully, the e-learning platform that they're using will give you the opportunity to type in some questions, or even to kind of raise your hand and to do that via video or telephone, however you are attending that. So you get the opportunity to answer questions, ask some questions. The other thing that I would suggest is, when you attend live, turn on your webcam. Turn on your webcam so that you can be seen. We've looked at the research, and the research indicates that your learning outcomes are better when your webcam is on. And I think it's that people are 90% less likely to multitask when their webcam is on. So just by turning your webcam on when you're attending these e-learning events, you stand a better chance of retaining that information, because you can be seen, you can be seen, and there's an element of accountability in that. And then one last tip on this is to close all things that go ping, or things that grab your attention, email, social media channels, anything on your computer or your device that would go ping and just grab your attention, even if it's just a second. A little ping comes in, and you just glance to the top of your screen to see, and it gives you the one line of who's maybe messaged you or emailed you. Turn that off so that you can be 100% fully integrated in the e-learning, as you would be if you were in a lecture situation in a classroom environment. You would have your devices turned off. Take it as seriously as you would in a class situation. And I guess my final tip on this is put in robust planning. I think now more than ever, and this is the first podcast episode of the new season of the new academic year, as it is in the United Kingdom if you're listening to this in real time. And traditionally, Rory and I speak about planning in this podcast. We'll speak about how important it is to get your planning in place for your upcoming academic journey for the year. Now more than ever, planning is super, super important. Make sure you got planning in place at milestones of where you want to be and when.
Yeah, absolutely, Ken. And I pick your points up about the making sure you've got no distractions. We've switched all our distractions off while we record this for obvious reasons. We don't want the podcast sound to have pings or burps or all the kind of sounds that social media or all the other things that computers generate, the software generates. So make sure you switch that off. And there's nothing worse, I don't think. Certainly as a former tutor, where you're sitting in the class trying to impart knowledge, some of which can be quite technical, and you see someone tapping away on the phone, and I think there's something about having a respect for yourself, your own learning, and also the people in your online group. So please turn everything off. And just before we move on, I think that one of the things that has really come out in the research is the Education Endowment Foundation states that peer interactions can provide motivation and improve learning outcomes. And multiple reviews highlight the importance of peer interactions during remote learning. So the message I would say is get involved. Even if sitting in front of a webcam feels a little different, maybe a little strange, get involved, look at your webcam, ask the questions, and it will become second nature to you. And one of the things to remember is this is going to be an integral part of your learning, because it's very likely that as this COVID situation moves forward, that more and more counselling will be online. So when you're interacting in your group, you're actually building a valuable skill set for when you decide to go into practice or when you go into your practice year, because you'll be using the technology to work with clients that you're learning with.
Yeah, that's a great segue for our brand new section of the podcast, and that's why we put it in. It's the Digital Counselling Revolution, because we kind of are being fast forwarded into having to use technology, whether it be to study or deliver counselling, and that will be coming up next. I think it would be amiss of me not to mention, as we kind of leave this first topic behind, that Rory and I have been working in e-learning for over 6 years. We kind of pride ourselves on doing the research, studying what works, what does not work. Rory received a Pearson Teaching Award for his excellence in or electronic learning. And that was a number of years back, Rory. And it's kind of, we have built a resource. We call it the Counselling Study Resource. And it's basically a massive library of resources, both document resources and video lecture resources. All of our lectures are mapped to the very courses that you will do. If you're in the United Kingdom and you're on a course that is where a academic body has created that course, we have mapped the resources to that. And we've created this to parallel people's courses so that they could kind of have additional resources to help them study. But I think now more than ever, the counselling study resources have become even more valuable. So if you're interested in getting some support, some e-learning support around your studies, along with a kind of a community, because there is a community that is attached to that as well, of students that are members, and it's well over 1,000 members that are there at the moment in that counselling study resources. And you want to find out more about that, just go to counsellingtutor.com and click on the student resources, and everything is there for you. But we'll leave that there as we venture into our brand new section of Digital Counselling Revolution.
Digital Counselling Revolution.
Well, this is a brand new section of the podcast, and we're calling it the Digital Counselling Revolution. And this is where Ken and myself talk about real aspects of the online counselling world, something that has come into really sharp focus over the last 6 months, and we believe will continue on. Let's be really clear here. Digital counselling has come of age. It was you could say it was a niche practice many years ago. It started with text counselling in the late 2000s, but now it's developed through the year into a lifeline for clients who've been cut away from counselling because they couldn't do face-to-face, and now it's become a mainstream form of practice. And there's an expectation that anybody who's listening to this, who's going to be a practitioner, maybe you're starting your level 2, or maybe you're starting your level 3, you could be halfway through your level 4, starting the second year. There's an expectation that almost certainly you are going to work at some point online. And that's the revolution. That's never, ever happened before. But there are things that we need to consider and think about when we think about working online, because it's a completely different environment to working face-to-face. And there are things that need to be considered that may not be immediately obvious. Isn't that right, Ken?
It is indeed. We chose the word revolution in Digital Counselling Revolution. Revolutions are a massive change, and those changes usually come with some form of pain attached to them. It's a change from one way of viewing things to another way of viewing things, and there's pain in the pivot. There is definitely pain in the pivot, and it's something that we've been close to. We created an online and telephone counselling course, and we've been helping literally thousands and thousands of practitioners pivot from their online face-to-face work into working digitally, but via a digital medium, whether that be video or whether that be telephone. That's still a digital medium. You're not there in person with your client. And we've seen the challenges that counsellors are facing with this. And one of the challenges that we wanted to kind of address today is starting with the online mindset. And what we mean by online mindset is, what is your relationship with technology? So this is a personal challenge to you listening to this. If you go back in your history of using technology, what is your relationship like? Do you kind of find yourself in the camp of, I'm not very good with computers, I don't like computers? Or is it, I'm fine with computers, I'm very proficient in computers or digital medium? It's about examining your relationship. And the reason for this is because who we are as a person, our own self-concept, call it, definitely comes into play in the counselling room. So we study that in our counselling studies. We learn about self-concept, and we realize that our truths and that we hold as a truth is not necessarily a truth. It is just our truth. And we realize that everybody may have their own truth and that people are welcome to their own truths. Well, what is your truth with regards to technology? And I'll kick this off with my own personal story, Rory. I was, completely illiterate when it came to computers and technology at a time. And when I started those first steps of playing around with computers and technology, I found myself getting frustrated. I found myself getting it wrong. I found that I couldn't find proper instructions. When I asked people for their instructions, they would think that they were explaining it in simple terms, but they were just talking gobbledygook. I had no idea what they were talking about, and I thought that it was impossible for me. I thought I'd never get through and become proficient and able to use the technology without really thinking about it. I had to think all the time. It was like the first time driving a car when you put in the clutch and you've got to change the gear and you've got to look in the mirrors, and it was just totally confusing for me. And the frustrations and at times anger, Rory, when it wouldn't work. It wouldn't work. And the fear when I thought maybe I'd lost something. I would download something. I just couldn't find it. The fear. And I recognize all of those incredibly strong emotions when really I was just a person on my own interacting with a piece of technology. All of that was within me, not within reality. And I guess had I gone into practice with that kind of relationship with technology and needed to work online because of kind of the situation we find ourselves in now, where kind of maybe you're forced to work online with your clients, I would have been bringing all of that self-concept with me, and there's a chance I could have contaminated the counseling relationship, projecting my insecurities with technology on a client.
Yes, you make a really, really good point, because I can remember many years ago having a conversation with my students who was very adamant about computers in counselling. Why do we need computers in counselling? And at that time, it was purely just to do your assignment on. And the conversation was around, I want to handwrite my assignment, and you're asking me to type it on a computer. And I said, well, that's the college policy. We don't, our technology doesn't allow handwritten assignments. And that was a real struggle for that learner. And I remember thinking that's going to be really hard. We put support in place for that person, but it meant that they had to go through an element of pain. But I think the other pain element about working online is that some people believe you cannot deliver therapy via a computer or a video link. And it should only be done face-to-face. That's how we've always done it. Well, let me tell you that technology has always been a part of counselling. And one of the people who pioneered technology was Carl Rogers. He spent thousands of dollars in the 1960s with tape recorders and technology. He filmed interactions, which was something that was never considered before Rogers came along. So technology has always been in education, and the research is now saying that you can have really good, meaningful therapeutic outcomes with clients working online. But it's like everything, you have to believe that the modality of therapy you're studying is going to work, and the meta model of therapy, it gives good outcomes, but you've also got to believe that the interface, the technology you're using, will do the same. And that sometimes is a bit of a tough mindset change for people who've traditionally just done face-to-face. I'm sure face-to-face will still exist, but it really is getting your head around the fact that you can just do the same good work, help people in the same way using technology.
I love that, Rory. It's like the question, I guess, can there really be psychological contact online? And the great thing is that more and more research is coming out that shows that definitely you can get, clients can get really positive outcomes from working online. But again, this is about our mindset. Are we contaminating that? If we're unsure, if we don't really believe, could we contaminate the counseling relationship there? And so mindset, what's that for you? But that, I guess, doesn't give you any solutions. You could just journal about your mindset and say, okay, well, I've got a terrible, just taking an example, a terrible relationship with technology. I'm not very good with it. It stumbles me up all the time, can never get things to work properly. So just journaling about that's not really going to make much of a difference. I can work on myself, but it's not going to improve my interaction with technology. So I wanted to share a couple of free resources with you that are really superb for learning technology. And the first one is called YouTube. You may know YouTube, you may pop onto YouTube, look at cats. I believe some people look at, I believe many people look at cats, Rory, on YouTube. Other things do exist. I know that many of our listeners found the Counselling Tutor and the Counselling Tutor podcast from our YouTube channel and the videos we've put out. But what I wanted to share with you is if you go onto YouTube, it is really a search engine of videos, and many of those are how to do videos. And it's people that have kind of uploaded those videos. So if you, for instance, wanted to know how to save a file, if you go into YouTube and put in how to save a file into the search engine, which is YouTube, and push enter, a load of results are going to come back, varying in quality, I have to tell you. So you might have to kind of dip into one or two, but you're going to find the information that you need. So YouTube is a fantastic little search engine for finding tips and tricks. If you're using any software, so for example, you might be using Zoom and you're not proficient, you don't know fully how it works, then software vendors on their websites, if you go to Zoom's website, using that as an example, they will have a support section. And within their support section, they usually will have, any good company will have tutorials, really simple, easy to follow tutorials on how to use their products and services. And one final tip, just for basic computer literacy, if you just go to Google as a search engine, or Bing, or whatever it is that you use as your search engine, and just put in free computer basic computer course, free basic computer course as a search there. You'd be surprised that there's a number of free courses out there that will walk you through the basics of using a computer proficiently. So there are hopefully some areas where you can, if you do struggle, as I did with illiteracy, that you can kind of sharpen your skill sets, because it ain't going away.
Absolutely. And if there's anybody left at the end of this segment who says, well, I'm not really technologically minded, let me just remind you, you're listening to a podcast. You've had to listen to it on a device. You've had to integrate yourself with technology. And if you resonated with anything that we've said, then you've built a relationship. You know, a lot of people say, oh, we love hearing your podcast, you and Ken chatting away. You built a relationship. So there's the proof in the pudding that you can build online relationships. Of course, the podcast is slightly different to a therapeutic relationship, but you are using technology. You're using it probably every day. You probably don't realize it. One of the top tips I would give you is don't think of it as computer. Think of it just using another piece of technology. Your microwave oven's a piece of technology. You turn your TV on. You operate your cable TV. There's so much technology you interface with all the time. Online counselling is just another form of that. You're probably doing it already, so relax.
I like that, Rory. Just relax. Take it easy, man.
Take it easy.
We're really laid back in this episode here.
Yeah.
I just wanted to kind of end this topic by saying, you know, if you're listening to this and go, you know what, I'm fine with computers. I'm proficient on computers. I know how to use computers. I don't need any of this information. Then I challenge you, and I challenge you to do the same exercise, to journal and write about how you are proficient at technology. And I'll tell you why. Because the clients you work with might not be. So it's about understanding where they're coming from as well. So we look at our own relationship with technology. We kind of want to be neither pessimistic nor optimistic. We will kind of want to find that median line in the beginning, so as to not to contaminate the counselling relationship. The information that we've shared with you, some of it is taken from the online and telephone counselling course built by Rory and myself. And our team, our extensive team, they've put hours and hours and hours into this course. It is a phenomenal course. It is over 80 hours. But the great thing about the course, it is self-directed learning, which means you can do the learning in your own time. You don't have to be at class at a certain time at a certain place. You work through the materials in your own time. There is a peer support element of that as well, where you'll be working online with buddies. So if you are interested in pivoting your face-to-face skills, doing a certified course that is mapped to the BACP core competences and curriculum for online and telephone counselling, then check out our course. It's at counsellingtutor.com. Just go to the main page and the information is all there for you.
Yes, and as I say, welcome to the digital revolution. We're going to be in a situation which is going to change the world of counselling. And I think, and as the podcast episodes will echo as we move through the year, will show us that it will be of a benefit to clients. Clients will be able to access therapy from their own homes, whereas maybe they weren't able to access it from agencies or face-to-face. So everything we do is in the service of the client. So maybe the revolution is a good thing. Revolutions tend to revolve. So let's keep the revolving going.
So we started off, Rory, you mentioning that there was a little bit of an existential crisis going on at the moment. We spoke about digital learning and how kind of the rug has been pulled for so many. And you met up with Professor Mick Cooper, who has a lecture that is in our CPD lecture library on existentialism. Can you kind of give us a bit of a flavour of what we can expect from Mick Cooper today?
Yes, well, there's no better person in the UK. He's one of the many voices. There are many voices, but he's one of them. He speaks so eloquently on existential therapy. I believe he trained as an existential therapist, and it's a question that gets asked so much. Well, what is existentialism? So you'll be able to find out at least what it is in therapy from Mick's wonderful explanation of it. So let's hear it now.
Practice matters.
And I'm delighted to welcome to the podcast again, Professor Mick Cooper. Welcome, welcome, Mick.
Thanks, Rory. It's lovely to be here.
Yeah, and recently you enthralled us with a lecture on existential therapy. And I certainly learned a lot. You did it for the Counsellor Study resource for our library. And it's a really interesting idea. And one of the things that I took away from it was that there's no real meta model around existential therapy. It's more of an idea or a kind of philosophy. Am I on the right track here, Mick? I wasn't paying attention.
Well, I think there are people who do existential therapy and would say they are existential therapists. But I think there's ideas in existentialism that all therapists can use about what we understand about human being and about focusing on how people experience their lives and some of the questions that we're all asking about choices and about limitations and about meaning. So I think there's something for everyone there, really, for all counsellors and psychotherapists to learn.
Yeah, and indeed, there are, although a lot of people listening to this may be person-centered therapists, and there is an existential kind of element or aspect to person-centered therapy. Rogers was quite enamoured with Kierkegaard, if that's how you pronounce his name, Kierkegaard.
I can't do the Danish, original Danish, Kierkegaard.
Kierkegaard, yes.
Kierkegaard. He had a dialogue with Buber.
Yes.
And it's fascinating, the dialogue with it. Yeah, he was interested. I mean, I don't think he went into it deeply, but certainly there's a lot of existential elements in person-centered, and particularly the focusing on how people experience their lives and about being true to yourself is what he got from Kierkegaard, particularly about being the self that one is rather than conforming to other people. So it's really in there in the person-centered approach. But it also takes it in some other directions, really. I guess there's less maybe of a belief in the actualizing tendency, more of a focus on some of the limitations and the choices. And, in the person-centered world, we talk about trusting the process and allowing things to unfurl. And I think in existentialism, there's more about you choose the process rather than anything is going to happen. You have to choose where you go. So it's a bit more kind of focus on maybe choices rather than organismic things evolving.
Yes, understanding of where you are in the world and the choices that you have around it.
Yeah, and how hard that can be sometimes, sometimes it's really hard. And person-centered doesn't talk so much about that. It sees freedom as a generally positive thing, whereas the existentialists focus on the idea that sometimes it's really hard to have loads of choices. And, and sometimes we hide away from our choices just because there's so many things that we're faced with and the responsibilities and the guilt that can come from choices. Sometimes we try not to choose at all. Irony is that not choosing is a choice in itself, so we can't, as Sartre says, we're condemned to be free.
Yes, that's a famous quote from Sartre, isn't it? And of course, it was Jean-Paul Sartre who gave us the term existentialism. I think it's interesting. Well, my students, when I taught, would say, "Well, what is an existentialist? What is existentialism?" And I guess I would say that's it.
Well, it's a kind of, people describe it in different ways, and there's no one thing that is existentialism. It's a philosophy. It's a philosophy which tries to ask this question: what is human existence, and what does it mean to exist? And kind of answers it in lots of different ways. Some of the existentialists focus more on the idea that to be is to be in relation, and some particularly focus on to be is to have freedom and choice, and some focus on hope. I mean, some of them are a bit more melancholic, but you've got others like Marcel who focus on hope, and that to be is to be hopeful. So there's a whole range of different answers, and therapists are taking it in different directions, but it always focuses on that question of what is this existence that we have, these unique individual existences. What does it mean to exist? What do we do with this life that we have? How do we make choices? And COVID-19 has throws up all these questions for us, really, about what kind of choices we're making, who we are, where we are. We get into ruts and we get into just seeing things in a particular way and following down paths. And then there's times in our lives when we kind of wake up and we look at our lives and we think, what's going on? And that's the existentialist moment, and that's why existentialism kind of can help us a bit sit with our clients in that and not theorize it away or pathologize it or understand it in terms of something breaking down, but also in terms of people having, it's a really good question. What is my life about?
Yeah, who am I?
I don't know, Rory. What is my life about, Rory?
I don't know, Mick. Only you know the answer to that.
Exactly. Well, only I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, and I guess that sums up the spirit of existentialism, doesn't it? That unknowing and that searching and that kind of making meaning. There's a very famous book called Man's Search for Meaning, which was written as a response to seeing the horrors of the concentration camp. Viktor Frankl wrote that particular book, and I've read it. And one of the things he said was that a search for meaning or some form of meaning kept people going during those horrendous times.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think there's one, when we did a survey once, and that was the most influential book on existential therapists. And I think Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning is a book that every therapist should read.
Absolutely.
Because it's about the horrors of, that people can face, but also the way that having some sense of meaning and purpose and direction in life can be so important. It's such a fundamental need, I guess, for us to make sense of our lives and our world, whatever orientation we work from. And a lot of clients come to us because fundamentally they've lost the sense of meaning and purpose. They've lost the sense of direction, or what I call directionality, in their lives, and they don't know where they're going. And existentialism doesn't give us answers about that, but it does say that's a bloody good question, and it helps us, I think, sit with that. You were saying a lot of people listening from a person-centered, and I think for me, what existentialism does is it really helps deepen our empathy and our acceptance of clients. Because if we read a book like Frankl and we realize how important that question about meaning in life can be for people, that when we're with clients who are asking those questions, we can sit with it, and we can sit with it more and more deeply, and be there and help and support people in that, rather than thinking that there's easy answers to it.
Yes, and I guess it speaks also to our own, as therapists, our own search for meaning. Because, I think, a lot of us, I mean, there may be some people, and if you are listening, congratulations to you that you understand the meaning of your existence, in which case, please give me a ring.
Good for you. Yeah, tell us what it is.
Tell us what it is. But, the times that, I've sat with clients and they've said, I really don't know who I am anymore. And I think those are the poignant moments in therapy where you're both really sitting within that search for meaning.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's one of the things I love about existentialism, is that it tells us that there aren't any easy answers. There's no kind of escalator that you start off as a trainee and then you become a therapist and then a supervisor and you discover the meaning and the answers to everything. And actually, a lot of us are still searching and struggling and go through periods where life is really difficult. And it helps us kind of, existentialism, I think, can help us realize that that's not because we're not doing it right, or we're not good enough, but actually that's the nature of being, is that there are some really tough questions, Rory. There's some really difficult questions about what is life about. Nobody really knows the answer to that. Nobody's come up with a ultimate answer. We all try and answer that question, and we ask it in our both ways. And if I recognize that I don't know the answer to that, then when I'm sitting with a client who's asking that, what it can really help me do is really be there in a state of acceptance. Because if I'm thinking this is an easy question, everyone should know the answer, I know the answer for myself, I might be sitting there with the client asking it and thinking, well, they'll discover it soon enough, and, see them in a state of kind of deficiency. But actually, if I've asked that question myself, if I've struggled with it myself, then I can recognize the intelligibility, the brilliance of asking some of these questions and the importance of it, and be there as just one other human being to them who's willing to help them in that search and in that struggle.
Yeah, a bit like fellow travellers, a Sputnik, travelling together, trying to work out what the meaning of life is.
Yeah, and other questions, obviously not just the meaning,
No.
There's lots of questions, but being with clients, as a fellow, and that doesn't mean that I start talking about all my problems and telling clients what I'm struggling with, that's not what therapy is about. I'm there for them, but I'm also there for them as somebody who, as you say, a fellow traveller who recognises the importance of these questions and is interested. And I'm interested because I don't know the answers, and I want to help this person find the answers that's right for them. And I'm genuinely interested to see how they find it. And then that's because I'm in that place of unknowing as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Are there any clients or presentations that existential therapy may not be a good fit for?
I'm sure there are, but I kind of think it's more about the individual person. And there's different clients different clients like different kind of therapies. Some like more task-directed therapies. Some like more non-directive therapies. Some really want to explore their past. I think clients who are asking questions about meaning, clients who are interested in these kinds of issues, existentialism might really suit. I guess clients who are looking for more direction, focus, structure. And I think it could be any presenting issue, really. But I think where they're asking for something more structured, focused, directed, where the therapist is maybe coming from more of a place of knowing that existential probably won't be the best therapy for them, may not be the best therapy. I mean, it may be that they start and they actually find that that's, fantastically helpful. What we found in our research is mostly when clients go into therapy with preferences, they kind of stick to those preferences. And clients who at the beginning are saying, like, I want some structure, I want some direction, I want some guidance, tend to stay and keep on asking for that rather than shifting. So I think it's more about the person than any particular one presentation.
Well, as we come to the end of this interview, Mick, it's always fascinating to hear you work. We heard you work on pluralistic therapy and existential therapy. I, for one, really enjoyed the lecture and got a lot out of it. So I'd like to say, as always, Professor Mick Cooper, thank you very much.
Thanks, Rory. It's lovely talking to you.
Thank you very much, Professor Mick Cooper, Rory, for taking the time to put that interview together, to share that information with us. It couldn't have been a more, appropriate time to be covering that subject.
Yeah, absolutely. And Mick speaks so eloquently about it. It's always a pleasure to hear our good friend Mick Cooper talking about the research. Of course, he's a avid researcher. That's what he does. He's a researcher, and explaining it in just so accessible terms what existential therapy is, how it works. So if there's any of you out there having to do a compare and contrast, existential therapy with person-centered or transactional analysis or CBT, there we go. That's your essay done right there.
Absolutely, Rory. And of course, if you enjoyed listening to Mick Cooper, and Mick has a number of lectures, including the lecture on existentialism in our CPD library. So the CPD library is for qualified practitioners only. It's absolutely jam-packed with lectures on presentations, things that you might come across in your counselling journey, specialisms that you might want to train more in, practice-related topics such as note-taking, GDPR, working within the law, the new academic framework. We really have a robust set of resources for the qualified practitioner who believes that they want to sharpen their competence at client level. And you can find out more about the Counselling Tutor CPD library by going to counsellingtutor.com. That's where we put all the good stuff.
It is. And what a great episode today. We started off by talking about the challenges and how to overcome them when you're going back to your studies and how you're going to be a successful online student. And then we talked about online mindset, what we need to think about when we are working online and how that is going to be a mainstay of people's practice for a long time to come. And we finished off, of course, with existentialism. No better way to end a podcast episode in our current climate than a good dose of existentialism from Mick Cooper. And as always, stay grounded, stay safe, and hey, join the digital revolution.
Take the stress out of your counselling studies and get the support of Rory and I by joining us in the Counselling Study Resource. Counselling Study Resource, or CSR for short, is the world's most comprehensive assignment guidance and study support resource for students just like you of counselling and psychotherapy. See how Counselling Study Resource can help you. Visit counsellingtutor.com. That's counsellingtutor.com.
Thank you for listening to the Counselling Tutor Podcast. Find the show notes for this episode on our website at www.counsellingtutor.com.